Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm Roseanne Nash, Senior Director in the ACT Children Young People Commissioner's Office. I'm joined today by our esteemed guest, Dr. Vic Fraser from Agenda Agenda, with Marika Henshaw from Agenda, Gemma Rowe and Leanne Britton from my team, who are providing technical support off camera. This webinar is online only, and you'll notice that your camera and microphones have been turned off. We'll be recording the session today and it'll be published on our website for others to access later. We do have the Q&A function running, so you're welcome to put up a question or contribute to the session at any time. You're also welcome to put in the chat what sector you're from so we can tailor some examples or ideas that might be relevant for you. Today, we're going to talk about strengthening child safe practice for LGBTIQ+ children and young people through the ACT Child Safe Standards. This session has been developed as part of the work supporting organisations to apply the Child Safe Standards in ways that are inclusive, respectful and responsive to the experiences of LGBTIQ+ children and young people. During the session, we'll look at why inclusion is closely connected to child safety, what we've heard directly from LGBTIQ+ children and young people through consultations, and explore practical ways organisations can strengthen their policies, environments and workforce capability to better support LGBTQIA+ children and young people. This webinar is designed as an introduction and will be supported by guidance that's being developed, and we hope will help organisations start thinking about how they can apply the Child Safe Standards in ways that work for all children and young people. Before we go on, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we meet today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to land, culture and community. I would also like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander LGBTIQ+ people and recognise the diversity and strength within their communities. Across Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have long recognised diverse gender identities and roles within community and culture. Acknowledging this diversity is an important reminder that conversations about identity, belonging and community have deep cultural histories and significance. The Child Safe Standards are a key framework for organisations across the ACT, and the ACT Children Young People Commissioner plays an important role in supporting organisations to strengthen their child safe practices. Before we move into the main presentation, we will hear from the Commissioner, Jodie Griffiths-Cook. Jodie will share some opening reflections on the importance of this work.
UMA. Promoting and protecting the rights, safety and well-being of children and young people in the ACT is at the centre of all that I do, and I thank you for the contributions you bring to this goal through your own work. The ACT Child Safe Standards are designed to help organisations create environments where all children and young people are safe, respected and able to participate fully. They recognise that child safety is not just about responding to harm when it occurs. It is about building cultures, systems and environments that actively prevent harm and support well-being. For LGBTIQA+ children and young people, feeling safe in services and organisations can be closely connected to whether their identities are recognised, respected and supported. When children and young people feel seen and valued, they are more likely to trust the adults around them and to seek help when they need it. We know from research and from the experiences shared by children and young people, both here in the ACT and elsewhere, that LGBTIQA+ children and young people can face additional barriers when accessing services or seeking help. These barriers may include discrimination, fear of being outed, or concerns they will not be believed or understood when they speak up. For organisations committed to child safe practice, this means that inclusion and safety cannot be separated. Understanding this is fundamental, especially knowing that these insights have been reinforced through consultation with local LGBTIQA+ children and young people themselves, whose views are critical in shaping safer systems. I would like to thank the young people whose insights inform our work for their tenacity and their wisdom. It is not just adults who teach children and young people. As adults, we must be open to learning from children and young people themselves. What they teach us helps us to improve our practices and to create a more inclusive world that respects and celebrates uniqueness and diversity. Being a child-safe organisation for LGBTIQA+ children and young people is not about creating entirely new systems. It is about ensuring that the systems organisations already have in place, including leadership, workforce capability, complaints processes and environments, work effectively for all children and young people. Thank you again for your commitment to respecting and upholding the rights, safety and well-being of all children and young people in the ACT.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roseanne, Commissioner Griffith-Cook. And I'd like to also thank everyone for attending today for your interest in this webinar. So yes, my name is Dr. Vic Fraser. I use they, them pronouns, and I work with the Gender Agenda. Agenda is a community organisation that supports transgender, gender diverse and intersex people in the ACT and the surrounding regions. Our work includes a variety of things, but mainly focuses around peer support programs, community training, education, advocacy, and professional networks. We also work really closely with organisations across a range of sectors, including health, education, youth services, and government, to help build environments that are safe and inclusive for gender diverse communities and intersex people and their families. A significant part of our work involves helping organisations better understand the experiences of gender diverse communities and intersex individuals and building confidence in how to support people respectfully. Education and training play a huge part in this work because for many organisations, the first step in strengthening inclusive practice is building a basic understanding of LGBTQIA+ identities and experiences. Without foundational knowledge, it can be difficult for staff and volunteers to recognise the barriers that our communities may face or to respond confidently when issues arise. Over the past 12 months or so, we've been working with the ACT Human Rights Commission, and more specifically the Children and Young People's Commissioner, to explore how child-safe standards can better support LGBTQIA+ children and young people and their families. This work has been informed not only by research and our sector experience, but importantly by consultations with children and young people themselves, who shared their experiences and perspectives on what helps them to feel safe. Importantly, they also shared what can make things harder to seek help when they might need it. Before we move into the child safe standards themselves, it might be helpful for us to outline what we will be focusing on today. This webinar is designed to introduce some of the key insights from the guidance material developed through this project and to explore how organisations can apply the child-safe standards in ways that better support LGBTQIA+ children and young people. First, we'll talk about why LGBTQIA+ inclusion is fundamentally a child safety issue, recognising that feeling safe in services and organisations is closely connected to whether or not young people feel their identity is recognised and respected. Secondly, we'll look at some of the barriers our communities and our young people can face when accessing support or speaking up. Notably, those barriers identified in research and through direct consultation with young people in the ACT. Third, we'll explore some of the key risks and barriers for LGBTQIA+ children and young people and how the child safe standards provide a framework for addressing these risks. And finally, we'll highlight some practical things organisations can begin doing now to apply the preamble statement to their practice and to strengthen their policies, environments, and workforce capability. As this is a 1-hour webinar, today's session is intended as an introduction to the topic and the guidance material. For organisations wanting to explore this work more deeply, there will be further resources and training opportunities available, which we will mention towards the end of the session. We have also allowed some time for questions. So it's really important to know that child safety systems do not work equally for all children and young people unless Diversity and inclusion is considered and explicitly provided for. When we talk about child safety, people often focus on preventing harm or responding when something goes wrong. But when it comes to child safe practice, the biggest impact is actually achieved by creating environments where children and young people feel safe to be themselves, participate actively and fully, and speak up when they are concerned, seeking help when they need it. For LGBTQIA plus children and young people, safety can be strongly influenced by whether or not their identity is respected, recognised and affirmed. Research consistently shows that LGBTQIA plus children and young people and their families experience higher rates of bullying, discrimination and harassment compared to their peers. They may also face additional barriers when seeking help, including fear that their identity will be disclosed without their consent, concern that they will not be believed or understood, or past experiences of negative responses from adults or services. It's also really important to note with our communities that this doesn't need to be an individual experience of a negative response from adults or services, but community-based negative experiences will have just as much impact on it, whether or not a young person feels safe to engage. These factors can make it more difficult for LGBTQIA plus children and young people to raise concerns and seek support. For organisations committed to child safe practice, this means inclusion and safety cannot be separated. Creating environments where LGBTQIA plus children and young people feel respected and able to be themselves is an important part of preventing harm and supporting disclosure. For LGBTQIA plus children and young people, inclusion is therefore a critical part of child safety. Notably, inclusion is not just about fairness or diversity. It is also about ensuring that child safety systems work effectively for all children and young people. For organisations like yourselves that are required to implement the child safe standards, this means thinking about how your existing policies, environments and practices support or unintentionally exclude LGBTQIA plus children and young people and their families. So as has been said, part of developing this guidance involved consultations with LGBTQIA plus children and young people. Children and young people shared their experiences of accessing services and what helped to make them feel safe. One key theme was identity safety. Young people emphasised that simple things like using the correct name or pronouns can make a big difference to how safe a space feels. The second theme that emerged was the importance of respectful staff behaviour. When staff and volunteers treat LGBTQIA plus young people and children with respect, they show that discrimination, harassment and exclusion will not be tolerated. They communicate that the organisation welcomes diverse identities and views, and that staff are open to better understanding how they can improve systems, processes and practices. Another important thing was privacy and control. Young people talked about wanting to choose when and how they talk about their identity, rather than feeling that information might be shared without their consent. Young people also highlighted that environments send signals about safety. Small things like inclusive language, respectful staff behaviour, or visible signs of support can help young people decide whether a space feels safe. These insights remind us that policies alone are not enough. Everyday interactions and environments play a significant role in shaping whether children and young people feel safe accessing services. Even small things like inclusive language or visible signs of support like posters or flags can make a profound difference. Understanding the risks and barriers LGBTQIA plus children and young people may face is an important part of strengthening child safe practice. Research and consultations with children and young people highlight several factors that can affect whether they feel safe accessing services or speaking up. One of the most significant barriers is the fear of being outed. One of the most significant barriers is the fear of being outed, meaning that sexual orientation or gender identity could be shared without their consent. Children and young people may worry that raising a concern could result in information being shared with parents, carers, or others before they are ready. Another barrier can be previous negative experiences with adults or services, or, as I said earlier, the knowledge of other people's negative experiences. If a child or young person has experienced discrimination, misgendering, or dismissal in the past, or heard of another person experiencing those things, they may be less likely to seek help. Some children and young people also worry that they will not be believed, particularly if the harm they have experienced relates to identity-based discrimination or bullying. Systems themselves can sometimes create barriers. For example, forms, policies, or complaints procedures that assume heterosexual relationships or binary gender identities, or which categorize experiences in ways that leave out homophobia, transphobia, or intersexism. And finally, environments can send signals about whether a service is supportive and safe. If children, young people, and families do not see visible signs of inclusion, respectful behaviour, or clear policies supporting LGBTQIA+ children and young people, they may assume the service is not safe for them and therefore limit how much they engage due to fear of discrimination or negative consequences. Understanding these barriers helps organisations identify their existing child safety systems. Understanding these barriers helps organisations to identify where their existing child safety systems may need strengthening. This is why you should never let me control the slides. The ACT Child Safe Standards provide a framework to help organisations create environments that support the rights, safety and wellbeing of children and young people. They aim to reduce the likelihood of harm occurring, increase the likelihood that harm is identified early, and ensure concerns are responded to appropriately. Importantly, the standards focus on whole of organisation approaches to child safety. This means that child safe practice is not just about an individual staff member's behaviour. It includes leadership, governance, policies, the environments in which young people participate, workforce capability, and complaints processes. All of these elements work together to create safer organisations. The guidance developed through this project looks at each of the 10 ACT Child Safe Standards with an LGBTQIA+ lens, and also against the 4 focus areas developed by the CYPC team to help organisations understand how they all work together. In the guidance material developed through this project, the standards are addressed individually as well as against the 4 focus areas that you see on the screen. These focus areas help organisations think about how different parts of their organisation work together to support child safety. The first area focuses on leadership, culture, governance, and environments, including how organisations set expectations around respect and inclusion, as well as establish accountability. The second focuses on engagement, participation and equity, including by promoting and respecting diversity, ensuring children and young people are informed about their rights and how to enact them, and establishing the preconditions to enable them to participate safely. The third focuses on workforce training and capability, and complaints processes, ensuring staff have the knowledge and confidence to support children and young people and respond appropriately to concerns. And the final area focuses on review and continuous improvement, recognising that child safety requires ongoing reflection and learning. Together, these areas highlight how leadership, staff capability, policies and environments all work together to create safer spaces for children and young people. For LGBTQIA+ children, young people and their families, each part of an organisation has a role to play in creating safety, belonging, trust, especially for those who are intersex or trans, non-binary or gender diverse, who often face additional barriers. Leadership sets the tone for what safety and inclusion looks like in practice. When leaders openly affirm LGBTIQA+ identities, it signals that respectful, gender-affirming practice is expected and supported. This means setting clear expectations around what respectful behaviour looks like, calling out discrimination when it occurs, and ensuring gender diversity is visible and valued in the organisation's strategic priorities. Some examples of this include leaders who introduce themselves using their pronouns and model the use of chosen or lived names and pronouns for children and young people. When misgendering occurs, leaders follow up promptly and coach staff on how to repair or prevent harm. Physical and online environments shape whether LGBTQIA plus children and young people feel safe and welcome from the moment they enter a space. They should signal safety and respect, showing young people that diversity is normal and affirmed. And some examples of this could include things like all gender bathrooms and inclusive signage that help children and young people feel that they belong in the space. Websites and digital systems that allow lived names and pronouns to be used with privacy options for those not out in all settings. And visual representations such as posters, photos, or icons that include sexuality and gender diverse children and families and signal that diversity is normal and respected. One thing I will say about physical and online environments, though, is that it is important to note that you don't get to choose whether or not you have done enough in that space to create safety. And that even though you have all the signs and symbols and icons up, a young person may still feel that that environment is unsafe for them. Clear policies will help staff understand expectations for gender affirming and respectful practice and provide transparent pathways for addressing harm. Some examples of this might include policies that specify that staff must use names and pronouns given to them in interactions and records, wherever safe for the child or young person. Procedures that outline what to do if misgendering or dead naming occurs, including apology, correction, and updating systems. Policies requiring staff to check privacy preferences when a child or young person shares identity information. And codes of conduct and grievance policies that make visible the inclusion of LGBTIQA plus people and their experiences, so children and young people know that they can raise issues when they occur. Here we bring together the key actions organisations can take to strengthen the rights, safety and wellbeing for LGBTIQA plus children and young people across Focus Area 2. The focus is on practical capability building steps that reduce identity-based harm and improve inclusion across the whole organisation. Empowerment. Empowerment of LGBTIQA plus children and young people means ensuring that they understand their rights, feel able to speak up, and have a meaningful say in decisions that affect them. Many LGBTIQA plus children and young people have had experiences where their identities have been questioned or dismissed, and so empowerment must be intentional. This could look like providing inclusive, accessible information using a person's names, pronouns that are given to you, and diverse imagery that shows LGBTIQA plus children and young people that their identities are recognised. Creating safe, structured opportunities for children and young people from our communities to participate, such as advisory groups or targeted feedback mechanisms, which help organisations understand what safety means from their perspective. These practices reinforce that their views matter and that their identity is being respected. For our children and young people, family and community involvement can also look different. Partnering with parents, carers, and community organisations helps ensure that safety initiatives reflect lived experience. Engagement opportunities should be designed so that families of gender-diverse children and young people can participate safely without assumptions about family acceptance or traditional family structures. Working with specialist organisations such as us can help to strengthen your organisational capability by providing advice grounded in children and young people's lived realities. When organisations consider these issues, it helps them to be responsive, not just to children and young people, but to their whole ecosystem around them. LGBTIQA plus children and young people are not a single uniform group. Many experience multiple overlapping forms of marginalisation. For example, being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander and queer, being culturally and linguistically diverse and trans, living with a disability, or experiencing socioeconomic disadvantage. These overlapping identities shape how LGBTIQA plus children and young people experience safety, risk, and inclusion. Strengthening child-safe practice through an intersectional lens means recognising that identity-based harm is often layered and that responses need to be tailored, person-centred, and not one size fits all. It is important that organisations recognise the compounded harm that can occur at intersections of identity. For example, a gender-diverse child or young person with a disability may be more vulnerable to exclusion or to bullying and less likely to be believed if they raise concerns. Staff need the skills to recognise these intersecting vulnerabilities and respond proactively and respectfully. Recruitment is one of the strongest levers for creating safe environments. When we recruit people who genuinely understand inclusion, it sets the foundation for safe and respectful practice. This means screening for the right values, not just technical skills. Applicants should be able to explain how they would support a trans or gender diverse child or young person in a real world situation. That helps us understand whether it can provide identity safe, whether they can provide identity safe interactions day to day. Should also be remembered that the merit-based process can inadvertently exclude LGBTIQA+ people, and processes need to be adjusted to support inclusive recruitment where necessary. Reference checks can also explore whether the person has demonstrated inclusive behaviour in past roles. Taking this seriously reduces the chance that harmful attitudes enter an organisation and strengthens trust for LGBTQIA+ children, young people, and their families. For our children and young people, having more than one way to report concerns is essential. Many are careful about who they trust or may not feel safe talking to an adult face to face. Offering digital, anonymous, and third-party reporting options increases and reduces the risk of harm. Confidentiality is especially important for children and young people who are not out in every environment. Our processes must protect their autonomy by allowing them to choose what identity information is shared and with whom. And this is particularly important if a concern relates to an issue of sexuality or gender identity. A strong process also recognises identity-based harm as a legitimate safety concern. This includes misgendering, exclusion, and breaches of privacy. When organisations take these concerns seriously, LGBTIQA+ children and young people learn that their safety, including their identity safety, is seen and valued. Even with strong recruitment, staff need ongoing support to practice confidentiality and safety. For many, this may be their first time learning about gender diversity, pronouns, or identity-based harm. Training helps staff understand the lived experiences of LGBTIQA+ children and young people and gives them practical ways to apply gender-affirming or sexuality-affirming approaches. Supervision is another important tool. It allows staff to reflect on situations, raise questions, and receive coaching on how to respond respectfully and safely. This is especially valuable when staff are still building confidence. By investing in ongoing learning, organisations can create a workforce that is prepared, consistent, and aligned, and LGBTIQA+ children and young people feel the difference in every interaction. Focus Area 4 reminds us that child-safe practices are never static. For our children and young people, continuous improvement is especially important because language, community expectations, and best practice evolve over time. Our systems, environments, and staff knowledge need to evolve with them. This might mean asking whether our environment is still feeling welcoming, whether our systems protect identity information, or whether new risks have emerged that we need to plan for. Tracking patterns of misgendering, exclusion, or other breaches of identity safety helps us to identify where improvements are needed. It's not about blame. It's about understanding trends so that we can act early and strengthen our practice. Regularly reviewing our environments ensures that they continue to signal belonging. That might include updating signage, refreshing imagery, or improving privacy settings in our digital systems so that children and young people can safely use their names and pronouns. Language changes, and so do expectations around identity recognition and privacy. Continuous improvement means adjusting forms, databases, and policies over time so that they remain relevant, respectful, and safe. When the four focus areas work together, organisations are far better equipped to create spaces where our communities and our young people feel genuinely safe, respected, and supported. This integrated approach reduces risk, increases help seeking, and strengthens young people's trust that the organisation will protect them. Creating inclusive, child-safe environments for our children and young people requires organisations to act intentionally and to consistently show their commitment to inclusive practice across the entire organisation. Organisations need to make a clear commitment to identity-affirming and respectful practice. When we affirm children and young people, when we affirm who children and young people are, we strengthen their safety and well-being. We need to minimise the opportunities for identity-based harm. This means designing environments, systems, and interactions that prevent misgendering, exclusion, and breaches of privacy before they occur. We create safety by building staff capability. We need staff to be able to respond to intersectional needs. Many of our children and young people also navigate cultural, disability, or social factors. Staff who can understand this can respond with greater insight and confidence. Recruiting and screening for inclusive, child-safe values ensures the right people are in the right roles. It signals that identity safety is a core expectation and value. We need to invest in ongoing training and professional development so staff stay up to date, confident, and connected to best practice. And finally, child safety improves when organisations continuously review and strengthen their practice, adapting to evolving language, community expectations, and what LGBTIQA+ children and young people tell us they need to feel safe. Together, these actions build organisations where LGBTIQA+ children and young people experience consistent safety, trust, and belonging.
Thank you very much, Vic. This brings us to the end of our formal presentation, and we now have some time for questions and discussion. And we encourage you to ask anything that's on top of mind while we have Vic here to share their expertise. We do have some questions that we've received in advance, so I'll ask questions, and Vic will be very happy to share their views. So the first question was, are there ways to use compliance with child safe standards to regulate how safety is provided to LGBTIQ+ students in schools?
Awesome. That's a really great question. And I think yes, is the really simple and short answer. In fact, I think being able to fall back on the child safe standards as the reason for making change, particularly policy change within schools across the ACT, is perhaps the best mechanism for dealing with any concerns or questions that might come that might make it feel a little bit harder. So I'm thinking there particularly around if a school makes the decision to create open gender neutral facilities, I can imagine that might bring questions from the parent community about how they're keeping their children safe. By being able to come back to, well, actually, we know that having this sort of facility means that all children have access to safe and affirming toilet facilities, which, let's face it, is a human right. And the child safe standards actually dictate that to us. It reduces the space for complaints or for questioning from other communities. So I think that looking at all policies and looking at all operational decisions within a school environment from that lens of the child safe standards is actually a really great way of strengthening practice within schools.
Thank you. We have a question also from the faith sector. So this question is seeking clarification on how faith-based organisations can hold the tension between being genuinely embracing and supportive of LGBTIQ+ children and young people while operating within theological frameworks that may differ from best practice inclusion principles.
That's a great question, and I think it's probably one that comes up a reasonable amount. I think the important way of looking at that is that there is a false dichotomy that's been created around people of faith and people from diverse sexuality and gender backgrounds. This dichotomy is harmful, I think, to a lot of people. I'm a person of faith myself, and I spent a lot of time feeling that I couldn't participate in faith-based communities because I was being told that I had no place in them, not necessarily by those faith-based communities, but by a broader social system. What we know from our practice is that there are actually quite a large number of LGBTIQA plus faith-based groups that can support faith-based communities to bridge that gap and to alleviate that tension, I guess. So I think one of the important things in a faith-based organisation wanting to navigate that space is to actually reach out within your faith-based community to find those organisations. So, for example, there are many LGBTIQ Christian youth community organisations that can support that. There are Jewish community organisations and Muslim community organisations that exist to support LGBTIQ people from those faith-based backgrounds. So that's the first place that I would look to. And then again, coming back to that idea of the fundamental belief is that people have a place within our environment. So we need to make sure that that environment is safe regardless of anything else.
Thank you. So the next question is relevant probably to a lot of settings, but also particularly therapeutic settings. So how can staff safeguard against aligning with adults over children and young people when they're faced with parental distress about their child or young person's identity or lifestyle?
Yeah, also these are great questions. Yeah. So I think one of the fundamental parts about that is that we need to support adults, absolutely, but we can't do that over the safety of the young person. So there are two different approaches, and we need to support that adult by connecting that adult in with services. So one of the things that Gender Agenda does is actually works with parents and family members who are perhaps experiencing that distress about what's going on for their young person. And we support them to connect with other parents and family members who've gone through that. We work with them to discuss their fears, to present them with perhaps different information. And that's a really important thing to do. That also shows the young person that their parent is not just reacting to fear, but looking to grow. So I think it's really important to sort of recognize where the parent is at, continue to support the young person, and see if there's a way to bridge the gap. And organisations like ours and others are absolutely here to support with that.
Thank you, Vic. So the next question is, how can staff respond to distressed parents who fear damaging their relationship with their child or young person?
Yeah, I think that links into the other one, making sure parents have access to services as well. I think parents are, I'm a parent as well, and I know that one of the things that I am terrified of is the idea that I've somehow managed to mess up my relationship with my young person, by asking him to put his shoes on or something like that. So I think, this is actually just a normal fear that parents have. By making sure parents feel supported, making sure parents feel heard, but making sure that they have that opportunity to do that in a space that's not directly related to their young person. They shouldn't necessarily feel like they have to be asking the questions of their young person or asking or raising their fears in front of their young person. That's the stuff that can become damaging. Directing parents and supporting parents to access information and services separately to their young person is actually a really important way of maintaining and protecting that young person.
Thank you. We've also had a question about terminology, and we have used LGBTIQA plus and LGBTQIA plus throughout the presentation. And is there a preferred term or a preferred way that organisations and staff and volunteers should actually refer to? your community?
Look, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that I would say in this one is actually being intentional about the letters and which letters you are using. So that comes down to understanding what each of the letters refer to. And where this particularly comes up is perhaps the use of the I in this acronym. Many people use LGBTIQA plus as a sort of catch-all for everyone without being intentional about the communities that they're working for or representing. So we've seen it in our organisation where LGBTIQA plus is used, but really people are mainly talking about lesbians, gay men and bisexual people. And the transgender, diverse, intersex, asexual, queer and other identities aren't intentionally included. This can be particularly harmful for communities or individuals who are part of the intersex community, where organisations will say that they are being, LGBTIQA plus inclusive, but actually not intentionally think about the specific barriers or harms that might have been experienced by intersex young people and children, and therefore not inclusive or deliberate around how they support the safety of those people. So in terms of the actual question, though, is there a preferred order? Not really. The ACT government obviously has a particular order of letters that they use. My stipulation on it is always be intentional about what you are using. So if you are not intending to be safe for trans and gender diverse people, don't use the T. And that's fundamental because you're signaling safety where safety doesn't exist.
I'll just make a call out if anybody has any other questions that you'd like to raise while we still have a little bit more time. Check in with my my team in the background. So, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. We've done some work with Vic's team and Marika particularly to develop some guidance for organisations to help them apply the child safe standards to LGBTIQ plus children and young people. We have two resources that will be live this afternoon. One is a poster that shows the barriers that all children and young people face in relation to safety, and then the additional barriers that LGBTIQ plus children and young people face. And we also have a short fact sheet for different types of organisations about actions they can take to improve their child safe practices. So if you would like to explore this work more deeply and are seeking further resources and training opportunities, Vic, where would you suggest organisations go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we at Agenda Agenda are very happy to work with any organisation looking to understand this more deeply, particularly from the lens of transgender, diverse or intersex communities. So you're very welcome to reach out to us directly. We're not always necessarily the best placed to do that work because, as has been sort of said earlier, transgender, diverse and intersex communities are our focus. Organisations like Meridian in the ACT are also able to provide information about lesbian, gay men, bisexual people or children who have been impacted by various illnesses. And of course, for people wanting to do a little bit more knowledge building around intersex matters, Interaction for Health and Human Rights is a national body that does also provide some support in that area.
So we also encourage you to explore our website to access our new resources and also to look out for the guide and other resources that will be coming soon. We also hope that you'll take a moment to take our short survey. We have a QR code on the screen, and your feedback is very important to us so we can continue to bring informative webinars and resources to you. So we hope this session's been a helpful introduction to the relationship between child safety and inclusion for LGBTIQ+ children and young people. So if you wish to contact Vic or Jodie, the Children and Young People Commissioner, their contact details are on the screen. There's also a range of child safe resources on our website that are more generalised. And also if my team can assist in any way with your organisation's learning needs around child safety standards, please don't hesitate to contact us. Our website and email address are on the slide. Thank you again, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we especially thank Dr. Vic Fraser for sharing their knowledge with us.